I think we're live there. I'm just going to give it just a minute or two so people can log on. And I just want to do just a sound check with Caroline and Gail just to make sure that our sound's working. So we'll just give it 1 minute and I'll be back directly and we'll run on with this evening's live feed. Okay, thank you. Back again, folks, and I'm just going to do a quick check on the sound. Yeah, I think Caroline's just going to check it now. Are you there, Caroline? Sound okay? Yeah. Okay, folks, thank you for joining us once again as we continue our Justice for Aaron Brady campaign. So the idea of these live feeds over last night and next few coming evenings is to give people who've just joined the campaign, either through YouTube or any of the other social media outlets, to see the path to follow as you follow the story and how we ended up in a situation where we had an unsafe conviction of our son, Aaron Brady, for the murder of Detective Garda Adrian Donohoe. Now, yesterday evening, we had a very brief live feed, and we just explained briefly that the videos we have created previously are showing clearly that the vehicle that in Garda Síochána said that was stolen in Clogherhead was allegedly used in the murder and robbery, and we've shown conclusively that that is not true. It is a false narrative. So what we want to do this evening now is to move on to the murder scene and show how that evidence details and how the case was portrayed and how there's a false narrative and how the evidence was actually physically tampered with and hidden, airbrushed in and airbrushed out. So, excuse me, just before I do that, just a little bit of housekeeping. Once again, I know I mentioned yesterday evening, I thanked everyone for their presence, and anything we get towards Aaron goes directly to Aaron. And we thank those people who made donations or whatever, and that goes straight to Aaron. And it's very, very, very much appreciated. And it really gives us great strength to know that people are behind us and supporting us in every way. Also, I think it was Lisa and Amy, the question last night, obviously, for some reason, they say I looked a bit pale or whatever. And are we all okay? Myself, Caroline and the girls are 100%. Aaron is in absolutely fantastic physical and mental condition. He is in the gym every day. He's doing his master's degree in physical training, and he's just completed some of those the modules towards that in Open University. So he's absolutely in tip-top condition and ready for the road ahead as regards as we move forward into appeals and into a retrial, or hopefully even better than that, but we'll see how things progress in this coming year. And mentioning the appeal, we've had a number of questions asked, when is Aaron's appeal? And again, if we go back to our friends who publish clickbait, gutter journalism like this, 3 pages on a nothing incident that did happen in Portlaoise Prison on New Year's Eve. On the 12th of December in the CCJ in Dublin, Aaron got his appeal date. And the appeal date is the 3rd of October. And none of these journalists printed that. not one of them. Now, myself and Caroline were in the court that day, and all the other appeals were in January, February, and March. I think there might have been one or two in May. And for some reason, Aaron Brady's appeal is the 3rd of October. So there we go. Our friends are kicking the authorities and the powers to be are kicking the can down the road again. But we do believe that the authorities are going to run out of road and there will be nowhere to kick the can. So eventually that road will come to an end. So once again, mainstream media, none of the journalists reported the date of the Garda killer appeal. So they want to write stupid stories about silly things that happened in prison. So that's in relation to the appeal. We have to deal with that. We have no other option. We have to suck it up and get ready for it. We're into 2023 now. It was difficult at the time when it happened initially, and but we're prepared to wait. So very quickly to give those of you who are joining us and try and give, I know we've put out vast swathes of information over the last 24 months or so. And it is difficult to follow because we've had to move from one incident to another incident, and then we incorporated the debacle and the disgusting behaviour of the authorities in America. And now that we have everything out there, hopefully these couple of videos will put everything in its place and a place for everything. So as I said, we're going to move on to the murder scene this evening, and I'm just briefly going to detail what happened. From the time a vehicle pulled up and blocked the entrance to the credit union car park. And what I hope to do is show clearly that there was evidence airbrushed in, evidence airbrushed out, and evidence was actually tampered with. So we'll start with the car that was allegedly used in the modern robbery. Now, they did say that it was a blue Passat was stolen in Clogherhead. The only person who seen that vehicle correctly was Mary, a senior credit union worker, who had driven into the car park. She was part of a convoy coming from other credit unions in the Cooley Peninsula, Cooley and Omeath. She drove into the car park, had circled round, and had faced the car at the exit of the gate. A vehicle pulled up and blocked her pathway. Now, there's two very interesting, in fact, there's three very, very vital pieces of information that Mary gives us. She's looking at the driver of the vehicle for over 58 seconds. She's looking at the vehicle for over 58 seconds. She says clearly the vehicle is grey or silver. And I have mentioned, and we have detailed in the videos, there's a list of videos below this live here. I think there's 24 or 25, and all those videos relate to the murder scene and the evidence that has been tampered with by the authorities. So Mary, the senior credit union worker, has said clearly that the vehicle is grey or silver. We've tested this in a number of scenarios, a number of different situations, and we have never at any time pulled a blue vehicle in front of an SUV that Mary was driving. We've dimmed the lights, we've had headlights on, and it has never, ever looked like a blue vehicle. The blue vehicle has never looked silver. We've done all those tests. So it's very simple, and we carry on from what we said last night. The vehicle stolen in Clogherhead was not the vehicle used at the murder and robbery. And that was a story put together by Garda Síochána, because, as we were told by Pat Marry in his podcast, 4 years after the murder and robbery, when Pat Marry returned around the table to the incident room in Dundalk, the whole investigation was a complete and total shambles. We had nothing. There was pale faces looking at me. I was there as the saviour. So they started pulling things out of the hat, and one of them was the theft of a Passat in Clogherhead that was found burned out. We'll deal with the burn site tomorrow evening. That's a different story, but we'll deal with it chronologically. And we're saying quite categorically, the blue car was not the car that was in front of Mary, the senior credit union worker. She tells us clearly it's silver or grey. Next, we talk about more evidence that has been completely airbrushed. completely airbrushed from the investigation. Mary says in a relatively short statement of just over 2.5 A4 pages, typed out, on 53 occasions, she says the word she, her, and she says, this stupid bitch pulled up in front of me. I thought she was looking at her phone. There is no doubt that she said it was a 25 to 30-year-old blonde Irish woman that was driving the vehicle. And this girl has been totally airbrushed from the investigation. Now, and I have mentioned, and you will see when you watch some of the videos directly below, Senior Prosecution Counsel, Mr. Brendan Graham, on a number of occasions, told us that they were looking for a female driver. He made reference to suspect B's girlfriend being the driver of the vehicle. He done this on a number of occasions in October, November and December 2018. But then I think the prosecution, the DPP, became aware that we had found CCTV footage of suspect B's girlfriend leaving Dundalk at 8:54, at the exact time the vehicle was dropping the raiders off. Now, he also, and I've mentioned this on a number of occasions too, Mr. Brendan Graham, mentioned a friend of Aaron's who had a girlfriend at the time who had blonde hair. And at the time of the Modern robbery, this girl was going through chemotherapy. And Brendan Graham, he may not have known, but if he was doing his job properly, he would have the information that that girl was going through chemotherapy at the time. She was very ill. And he disgustingly threw her name and her details into the courtroom and said it to the jury. I think Caroline's going to show me.
Why didn't Aaron's solicitor point any of this out from Lisa and Amy?
Lisa and Amy again, thank you. So I'm just going to, I don't really want to cut across too much, but we will when Lisa and Amy has asked, why didn't our solicitors point all these things out? Up until May 2020, we had a solicitor's firm here in Uri, and we changed those people. A lot of what you see in our 175 plus videos, probably 60, 70, possibly 80% of that information I had sourced, gone through the evidence and shown to our solicitors. And in May 2020, myself and Caroline had a meeting in the solicitor's office in Uri, and the solicitor told us quite bluntly that day that they weren't an investigative solicitor and they weren't going to investigate these issues. So we changed that week. It was a massive decision in the middle of a capital murder trial to change solicitors. And we employed, for Aaron, we employed the services of Phoenix Law in Belfast. And they came into the case just as we were moving on to the American aspect of the case. And all the burn site, the murder scene, Clogherhead and the theft of the Passat had gone past. And we weren't aware of how court systems work. For example, I'll go over it again tomorrow night, but it's always a good point I like to reference. I watched a gentleman give evidence who's seen two vehicles up near the burn site at 10:30 p.m. on the Friday night, approximately an hour after the murder robbery. But previous evidence from the previous gentleman would have suggested and would tell us that the car was on fire at 10:05. So we had Garda CANNOT, Pat Murray, Brendan Graham, Lorcan Stain, all these people brought a man into court and give evidence that he's seen a car at 10:30 that was on fire at 10:05. I know it's quite difficult to comprehend that. And I myself and Caroline were almost of the opinion that these people would come back and we would re-question them, but that's not how it works. And all that had gone past us by the time we realised what was happening here and how this miscarriage of justice was being played out and in a theatre in front of us. And I think we've mentioned that on a number of occasions. It was a theatre. So Amy and Lisa, thank you for the question, but that's as simple as that. I had given a vast majority of this information to our solicitors, but they didn't pass it on to our senior counsel, our barristers, and they didn't have the information to question and to cross-examine these witnesses. And if we had to have Phoenix Law from the beginning, I would not be making a live stream here tonight. That is the fact. This nightmare would have been over for us, I think, in October, November, December in 2019. But that wasn't the case. The solicitors had their opportunity and they told us that they weren't prepared to investigate. So that's why, girls. So I'm going to go back now to the murder scene. And we've mentioned that the lady seen the silver car. We mentioned that the driver of the getaway car was a female. And obviously why that is so important, it's been the most extensive investigation in the history of the Irish state. And as we will, in 2 or 3 days' time, we'll be putting in the videos in relation to the gang, the fictional gang related to Aaron Brady. They could not link through phones or through any other contact, friendships or associations link a blonde woman with Aaron Brady. So it is as simple as that. So it didn't suit the narrative and they totally erased the blonde-haired woman from the investigation. So that's how that happened. We then have a situation where a number of footprints were found behind the wall. There's a back wall in the credit union. And again, if you look at the videos, we have some graphics and some details, and it shows that the raiders were hiding for approximately 45 minutes. A vehicle turned down a little side road adjacent to the credit union, dropped off the raiders, and this appeared to have come up behind the credit union in through a number of small fields. And there was footprints found behind the wall. There were casts taken of these footprints. The casts from the footprints were sent to Germany and Holland. They were extensively and forensically tested. And the make and sizes, as best as possible, we never got much detail on these. And the reason being, they didn't fit Aaron Brady or any of the other suspects. Now, I read over 3,000 statements, and in scores of those statements, whether they be Aaron's and the other suspects, friends, acquaintances, girlfriends, just people who knew, they were questioned about what footwear did Aaron Brady have. They actually, when our house was raided here and was searched by the PSNI, they actually took, I think, a couple of pairs of Aaron's work boots. And of course, nobody could match the casts to Aaron's either size or the make of shoes and boots they were wearing. And again, totally airbrushed. So the people who murdered and shot Detective Garda Adrian Donohoe were wearing a specific type of boot and obviously a specific size, and they don't match Aaron Brady. And that was almost completely airbrushed. That wasn't paraded around the court for over a day. We had a whole day in court where Seamus O'Donnell, I think it's Seamus O'Donnell, Garda Seamus O'Donnell, was forced to dissect a cartridge, forced to dissect a shotgun, and they don't even know what type of shotgun it was. We talk about theatrics, and Brendan Graham made that guard, albeit reluctantly, the guard done it. He actually made him lift the shotgun up to his shoulder and move it round the court. And they didn't even know what type of shotgun it was. And Michael White allowed this to happen. So that shows you the theatrics, and not a word from Brendan Graham or Logan Stain about footprints that don't match any of the suspects. Excuse me. We move on then to a situation where evidence was very severely tampered with in the court. And There was a dash cam. Another senior credit union worker, Pat, had a dash cam on his front of his Mazda car, and it picked up sounds, shouting, and male voices shouting, "The raiders coming across the wall." And again, it's a subjective view, and it's something that will probably be dealt with in much more detail in the very near future. But during the course of Aaron's trial, the recording was played. And obviously, I would be biased. I would have my own views on the accents and the voices we heard over the sound system in the court. So that was played once, the normal shouting, what was actually recorded. And then when it was played again to the jury, Brendan Graham and Lorcan Stain played whale music and dolphin sounds. It was the most pathetic, and I really am sorry that didn't stand up that day in court and contest what we were listening to. A load of squealing, high-pitched noises. And we were told that this was the sound of the recording that was digitally enhanced, again in Holland and or Germany. I think it may have been Holland for the sound. So they were actually hiding the tampered with physical evidence and played a totally different recording. It was premeditated, and it was done for a reason to mislead the jury and the judge. Not that Michael White wasn't too easy to mislead, because he actually allowed this. Michael White heard both versions. And if there was any scintilla of decency in the man, or if there was a scintilla of decency in Brendan Graham, they would not have had the gall to play that enhanced noise through the speaker system in the CCTV. It was totally disgusting that it was allowed to happen. We move then, again, we go back to Pat, the senior credit union worker, and the raiders left a hammer similar to this. You will see this quite readily in any of the, if you Google the hammer left behind at the modern robbery. And this bit here, I think it's the glass bit, is actually broken. Okay. And there's a nut, a bolt sticking out of here on the original. And it was a used hammer. There was a number, as far as we were aware, we never seen the actual hammer that was found. Very worn, lots of chips and marks on the shaft. And as I say, the head was broken. Detective Mark Phillips and Detective Jim McGovern took this hammer to a jail in the south of England to a convicted cocaine smuggler and asked him, did he know who owned the hammer? Now, this is 4 years after the event. I believe they visited the prison in 2017. And I am suggesting that very strong and serious offers was made to that young man to say certain things about this hammer. And the hammer has been airbrushed from the scene. Not a word about the hammer. Now, it may very well come back into as we move on forward, and we would look forward to that. And there was no DNA on this hammer. Now, again, I've said in a number of videos we made in relation to the murder scene, I have spoken just casually to two forensic scientists and give them a brief description of the type of wooden shaft, rubber base to the shaft, and they're amazed that there is no DNA on a working hammer. But there was no DNA in it. So again, another mystery, airbrushed in, airbrushed out, didn't suit the narrative. And it gives us some idea of the caliber of people Phillips and McGovern, well, we know that from who they dealt with in America, but they were willing to go to a young man with very serious drug importation charges, and that young man has served his time for that and has moved on. So we move on then to another credit union worker, Bernadette, and her car was also attacked. Her window was broken, and her attacker shouted quite violently, "Give us the fucking money," and he shouted at her on a number of occasions. And Bernadette, when she was being debriefed immediately after the event, and later on as she was being debriefed in the weeks after, said quite clearly that it was a Dublin accent that was shouting at her. And she confirmed this because her first debrief was undertaken by a member of Garda Síochána from Dublin with the Dublin accent. And as that young man shouted at Bernadette, Bernadette said, "Yes, that sounds like the radar." Now, this Dublin accent, again, we go back to the same scenario where we have a young girl that they cannot link to Aaron Brady because the gang link to Aaron Brady simply does not exist. It is fictional, and it has been, they don't even have 5 gang members. But we'll deal with that when we move on to the fictional gang created by the DPP and Garda Síochána. So they cannot link either through phones, through friendships, through associations, someone with a Dublin accent. So obviously someone from Dublin that is linked to Aaron Brady. So the man who attacked Bernadette broke her window and took some items out of her car. Those people, that man had no link whatsoever with Aaron Brady. So again, the Dublin accent completely airbrushed out of the case. And if we refer back to the recording from Pat's dash cam and we look at the Dublin accent with Bernadette, there might be a clue there as to what I believed I heard when I heard the dash cam on one occasion, when it was played correctly and it wasn't tampered with by Staines and Graham. And then we move on to its reporter, I think it was Owen Reynolds, we've shown quite clearly at the start of the prime time programme. Now we've done I think I've done 20 videos contradicting the stories peddled by the reporters Cummins, Reynolds and Schiller on the prime time programme. And at the very outset, I think in the first 2 minutes, investigative reporter Owen Reynolds said there was no DNA, there was no possibility of DNA. It was all over in 58 seconds. And no harm to your own, it's only a personal opinion of mine. I've watched you several times saying it, and I don't believe you believed it when you're saying it. Because there was DNA on the inside door of the Garda car that was never accounted for. And I get it very difficult to believe that in Garda Síochána did not trace any or every person that went near that offences that Detective Garda Joe Ryan was driving that night. Whether there be mechanics, whether it was someone filling the diesel, whether it was any member of Garda Síochána. And we do know that the second radar reached in and took the keys out of the car where Joe Ryan was sitting. So to say that there's no DNA, there's no forensics, there was footprints, Owen, and to all the other investigative journalists. There was a hammer, there was Dublin accents, there was a voice recorder, there was CCTV footage. Is that not forensics and evidence that use as purveyors of news to the Irish public are refusing? This is the sort of shite that just want to talk about. A non-event that happened on New Year's Eve in Portlaoise prison. That's the standard of your work, and that's how we see it at this moment in time. So there was DNA. It is as simple as that. And then we move to the situation where the main witness, a man with nearly 30 years experience policing the border, was faced and was looking at two gunmen. Detective Garda Joe Ryan. He was debriefed immediately after the raid, and he was debriefed as much the same as the credit union workers over a period of number of weeks after the event. And his story remained the same. And his story remained the same until April or May in 2020, 7 years later, when he gave his evidence, because he couldn't change his evidence. And I think I've mentioned this before, it was probably the worst couple of days of our lives, waiting for Joe Ryan to take the stand, because we did believe, and I firmly believe, that Joe Ryan was going, because I had seen what happened before. I seen the guards bring a man who seen a car on at 10:30 that was in flames at 10:05. I seen them talk about a vehicle that had absolutely no resemblance to another vehicle. I've seen what they got away with. And we were of the opinion, I was of the opinion, that Joe Ryan was going to fluff his lines a little and say he wasn't sure of the height. But he didn't. He was composed, and I thought he handled himself very well in a very difficult situation, because the bottom line is here, Joe Ryan lost his colleague and his friend brutally. And I'm sure what he seen that night was horrific. So he would have doubled down. He would have done everything in his power to give the correct information, because he was a professional and he had that experience along the border. And Detective Joe Ryan, as the two men looked down at him, the man with the shotgun who shot and murdered his colleague, Joe Ryan said was 6'1" or 6'2". Indeed, in some of his debriefs, they mentioned 6'3". And it's not that this person stood alone. It's very important for those of you just joining us. Joe had perspective. So he had Radar 1 pointing the shotgun directly into his lap, and Radar 2 standing to his right, to the man with the shotgun to his left. And he had perspective, and he said the man with the handgun was 5'7". Now, if Aaron Brady was the man with the shotgun, and we take him down to 5'7", it means the man with the handgun was a dwarf. He wasn't the height of the apex of the open door of the Avensis. So that didn't happen. We also have CCTV footage, although it is grainy and of poor quality. We can see clearly that the radar with the shotgun is head and shoulders above the second radar. So I think it's quite simple. We've shown you this before. Aaron Brady cannot be the man who shot and murdered Garda Adrian Donohoe, because Detective Joe Ryan describes the radar with Radar 1 with the shotgun as 6 foot to 6'1". And we've never exaggerated that. Joe, as I said before, in subsequent statements, said the gunman was even taller. He was 6'2". And as the gunman with the shotgun left the scene and ran past Mary, the credit union worker, she says that he looked like an athletic fella. He was tall enough, and she mentions that the gun was going down his long legs. Now, ever since Aaron Brady was born, no days since the 16th of February 1991, Aaron Brady has never had long legs in any of those subsequent days. And I think a picture we have shown before, and I'll show it here again. The man who shot and murdered Detective Garda Adrian Donohoe is actually taller than I am. He's about 2 inches taller than me, and that's Aaron Brady. So, the evidence and the details portrayed by the DPP have been tampered with, have been manipulated. And as I've said before, the evidence has been airbrushed in, the evidence has been airbrushed out to suit a false narrative. And I will say once again, Pat Murray told us very clearly that in September, October 2016, almost 4 years after the Northern robbery, in the incident room in Dundalk, in Fort Apache, as he calls it, Fort Apache, he calls Dundalk Garda Station, the whole thing was a fucking mess. People with white faces were looking at him and wondering, Pat, what are we going to do? Pat, what are we going to do? And Pat was used as a stoogie, and those above Pat had something to do. Those people says, we're going to frame someone for this. We have to get someone. And they picked on our son, Aaron Brady. And we've said from the outset, for those of you joining us again, Aaron was no saint. He was involved in diesel laundering. And he was involved in cars. We've said that from the very first video we done. And they thought Aaron Brady was an easy target. And I think what we've shown you there tonight, what I've explained about Joe Ryan, and I'll show you that picture there one more time. It is as simple as this. Aaron Brady cannot be the man who shot and murdered Detective Garda Adrian Donohoe. And I think for all the families involved, it's coming very close to the time where that has to be altered. What has been done to the families and the 10 years of torture people have gone through. And somewhere out there tonight, and I'm sure it's quite possible at this moment in time, the gang who murdered Detective Garda Adrian Donohoe and Rob Lodge Credit Union is watching this live stream. And but that's not for us to solve. That's for the authorities to solve. So that gives us some idea of the murder scene. As I said, I think there's 25 videos we've just put up below this links. I see there are texts there. I'm not very good at this. Hope you had a few other points in the BRK pour over. Funny it is, a nice pub, yeah, with no evidence whatsoever. Is there any other questions, Caroline, I need to answer? Yeah, I did just mention that. Yeah, they were dropped down. There's a little road adjacent to the credit union. A vehicle drove down at 8 minutes at 2052, I think, or 2051. Pulled down along the credit union, dropped the 4 raiders off, and they made their way through the field, sat behind the wall, and left footprints. Footprints don't match Aaron Brady or any of the other gentlemen that are currently facing charges for the robbery. And again, it's just something I'll mention again. At this moment in time, I don't understand it, and we don't purport to understand it. But at this moment in time, no one else has been charged or appear to be taken to court for the murder of Detective Garda Adrian Donohoe. And a whole lot of larriers in white shirts with buttons on their lapels and on their shoulders told us that everyone was going to be sought after and they were going to be taken to court for murder of Detective Garda Adrian Donohoe. Now, the charges may very well change, but I'm really only going by what these people here tell us, that it's for burglaries and robbery at the larger credit union. That may very well change, but it's just to give you some insight into what these people are doing. I hope that gives a little insight in. So we've part one is the car at Clogherhead that we say wasn't used in the modern robbery, and I hope I've shown clearly. We've ran through the blonde woman, the female driver, the wrong coloured car, the footprints, the sound, the voices that can be heard shouting on the dash cam, how they have been tampered with, the hammer, the Dublin accent, the DNA in the car, and Detective Joe Ryan's description of the shooter. And also that is backed up by the senior credit union worker and CCTV footage. So tomorrow evening, we're going to run through, and I'll have a list of the videos below our live tomorrow evening, which will look at the burn site, which is an absolute farce. It is a complete and total joke. People will not believe. I've told you a little bit tonight. Bringing a man into court, seen a car at 10:30 that was on fire at 10:05, and it's even worse than that. But I'll give you some brief details on it and a list of the videos to go and watch. Thank you for your interaction. Thank you for some your comments. I'll read those now as soon as we're finished.
Laura got an error message. She couldn't get on. Sent a message through.
Who?
Or one of Aaron's followers.
Or one of Aaron's followers.
Laura's called on the channel. She couldn't get on.
Oh, some sort of an error. We do have issues. If anyone else, if you do know, if your friends or contact in your own groups that are having errors or issues watching our lives, I'd much appreciate if you'd let us know, because we are, as we have told you before, being attacked on all our platforms. So they're trying to silence us for whatever reason. And I hope there'll be no further form of censorship as we move forward and other court cases, and everyone will be allowed to move freely within our democratic country and our democratic judicial system. And there will be no issues as we move forward with other trials, and everyone is allowed to move freely within their own country and within their own judicial process. Okay, thanks very much, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Please continue to like, comment, and share. If you have any questions about any parts of either the theft of the car or the murder scene, please drop us a question and I'll deal with it tomorrow evening. And hopefully then we can get moving in tomorrow evening to the burn site. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and look forward to doing the live stream again with you again tomorrow evening. Thank you very much. Thank you.